And then on my very first film, which was Inherent Vice, I had a small part, but I got to start on the very first day, and they kept putting me on the schedule, my scene on the schedule, but kept bumping it because I was unimportant. But that meant that I got to be there the whole time and watch all of these amazing actors come in and do work. And it just, the ones that really excited me to watch were the ones who just did something a little bit different each time. And I guess I've just taken that with me on every job that I do.
How did this project come to you?
So to backtrack, in January of 2020, Darren did a reading of this at a warehouse somewhere in the East Village, and Sadie and Brendan were a part of that. So that was kind of like their audition, and then they were going to start. They were hoping to start in March, and then of course COVID hit and everything shut down. But that was good for me because I found out I was pregnant right before lockdown, and spent that time having a child, and it was great. And so fast forward January 2021, once everything got back up and running, I got the script for The Whale. I didn't know anything about it. Unfortunately, I felt like I wasn't really up for the job, for a lot of reasons, because I had a baby, and then also the character wasn't written specifically for an Asian person. And I just thought, wow, the casting net is just so wide for this. There's so many talented actors and so many more famous people than me who could play this role. But somehow I got the part. And I found myself traveling with my little 8-week-old baby to Newburgh, New York, and rehearsing for 3 weeks and then filming.
You had some reservations about going out for this too, right? Were you a little wary of going back to work for this project, or?
Yeah, I had waited a really long time to be a parent. I was 41 when I gave birth, and I was just really looking forward to being a mother and staying at home. And when my agent told me, oh, Darren's working on his next movie, and here's the script for it, I was almost afraid to read it, because for that reason, I just didn't want to get emotionally attached to it. And I told him I just wasn't going to throw my hat in the ring for it, and he let that sit for about a week and and let me think about it for a week, and circled back around. So I'm glad that I guess I came to my senses. But yeah, it was a really hard decision. Everybody was really excited for me, my friends, when they found out that I was going to work with the Darren Aronofsky, but I felt like I was going to barf.
And then you get to Newburgh, New York, and he sort of had you rehearse this like a play, or what was that process like?
Yeah, so the movie is adapted from the stage play, and the playwright, it was his first screenplay, and he and Darren had been working on it for about 10 years, and they decided to keep it very close to the play and not open up the world and add a whole bunch of characters and travel here and there and show flashbacks and all of that, which I thought was really ambitious, because you all have the pleasure of living in New York and experiencing theater. It's very different how you receive a performance on stage than on camera. So I was just curious how they were going to do it, because a lot of times I don't think that plays make for good movies.
Yeah.
And but this is Darren Aronofsky. I'm sure he's going to crack it. And I thought he did such a great job. Everything made sense. The way he was blocking us, it was for the purposes of that 4:3 ratio that he was shooting. And that makes, because it's a little bit more square, it makes shooting coverage over the shoulder coverage a little bit more difficult. And so that's why we had to be very specific during the rehearsal process about where we were and how that would show on camera.
What is Darren like as a director? I mean, his films seem so intense. What is he like sort of on the set and with his actors?
He was just a surprise, a complete surprise. The very first time I spoke with Darren, it was over FaceTime to tell me that I had the part. And I happened to be feeding my daughter. She was in my arms, and I was feeding her at the same time that he called. And he was completely unfazed by it. He said, just keep doing what you need to do, and we'll just keep talking. So that really set the tone for how the rest of the shoot was going to be. His team was also really supportive of me. I just had the assumption that new mothers would be looked at as sort of an inconvenience, but I just didn't feel that way at all. The producer had a whole separate room for my baby if I wanted to bring her to work. The first AD, you know how first ADs are. Like it's usually some gruff guy, but it was a really great Italian guy, and he said, "You're so courageous. I think you're so courageous for coming to work right now with a new baby, and anything you need, if you need to take a break to go pump or do anything, like you just let me know." So I just felt like they were very supportive, and it was just, I hope that that's the same experience that other people have, because I know it's a very tricky thing, family planning and everything like that for artists.
And Brendan Fraser is just...
Oh, but I didn't answer your question. What's it like to work with Darren? Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm bad at this. Darren, so I started it by talking about the FaceTime. Okay, that's where I was going with this. And then on the very first day before we started filming, he took everyone outside, and we all stood in a circle and held hands, and he thanked us all for being there and giving our time to him and trusting him, which I thought was so sweet and unexpected, because he's a very well-known director, and you sort of get certain ideas about people because his work is so bold and hard-hitting, and you think he's going to be this very tough guy, but he was so sweet and so approachable. And as an actor working with him, I felt like he was just so receptive to anything that I wanted to bring into the scene, and try so many different things. That scene where Charlie nearly chokes to death, and in front of me, and one of the takes I got very frustrated with him, and I hit him, and Darren was like, "Whoa, no, ooh, I don't know if that's where we want to go." And so we kind of took a little break, and he went out and talked to the writer, and I'm so glad that he kept it in the movie. I explained my my reason why, and how I felt that it was appropriate for the character and the situation. But it's that sort of openness to trying out something, and maybe that wasn't initially what he thought the scene was supposed to be. He was still, open to my interpretation of it and where it went.
I talked to him for another piece once, and he was saying that you really like to try a lot of different things with each take. Is that sort of your approach? And can you talk a little bit about why you favor that approach?
Well, I think if, we're recording it, you already have it. Let's try something else. Let's do something new. I think I like to do something different each take, just for myself, just to keep it fresh. And it just, in a way, it takes the pressure off of trying to get the perfect take, because it means that there's no one right way to do it. So it could be 50 different iterations of that same scene. And that just frees me up, because there's not one target that I'm trying to hit. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then on my very first film, which was Inherent Vice, I had a small part, but I got to start on the very first day, and they kept putting me on the schedule, my scene on the schedule, but kept bumping it because I was unimportant. But that meant that I got to be there the whole time and watch all of these amazing actors come in and do work. And it just, the ones that really excited me to watch were the ones who just did something a little bit different each time. And I guess I've just taken that with me on every job that I do.
I feel like we have to talk about Brendan Fraser, because he's just unbelievable in this movie. And what was he like on set? I mean, he seems like such a gentle person.
Yeah, he is. I wasn't super familiar with Brendan's work prior to meeting him at our table read, and I just instantly liked him. He is just so sweet, and it just radiates from him. It's not an act. It's something that he just has going on 24/7. That's just who he is. And I think I'm a pretty good gauge of, of people. And he's definitely who he presents himself to be. That is who he is. And then I just respected him as an actor because I could just tell that he was so serious and so focused and there to do the work. And I think maybe in his younger years, because he was such a hunk, he was sort of limited to these very, hunky physical roles that he had to do. Not that this role isn't physical in its own way. I think that, maybe his past work doing George of the Jungle or The Mummy or whatever, I think in some ways shows in this, because the action is like it's micro, but it still requires that same sort of physical intelligence and choreography. So I was trying to pay him this compliment, and he said to me, I was just trying not to do it more than once. I just wanted to get through it.
I mean, but that brings up an interesting point, which is this is a fairly small film, but there's all these elements with makeup and this suit that he's wearing. And I mean, what is that like to have to sort of navigate that part of things? Did that add time and pressure and things like that too?
Yeah, I think it was for that reason we had the 3-week rehearsal period, because we wouldn't have that time to play on set once Brendan was in that prosthetic suit. Oh my gosh, I had a little bit of experience working with a prosthetic on Downsizing, because my character in that movie was an amputee, and it takes a lot of patience to sort of stay in the place where you need to be as people are working around you and you're preparing for them to call action. And so I just watched Brendan with amazement that he didn't close himself off and get quiet or go inside of himself. When people were working around him, he was still very present and still took them in and was interacting with them and was so gracious. And that's what I found so incredible, that he was able to do that and still give the performance that he did. And it's an example that I'll take with me on everything. Like if somebody's being a little cranky or a jerk that day, I'm going to be like, Brendan Fraser didn't. He wasn't like that.
I also want to talk a little bit about Liz, because she's such an interesting person. She's got, in some ways she's so helpful with Charlie and stuff like that, but then she's also doing things like getting him junk food, right? And can you talk a little bit about these contradictions that she...
Yeah, I loved all of the complications and contradictions about the character. I loved that she was mean, but she was really funny, and that she was so caring, but also caustic, and that relationship was tricky. But the more I thought about it and looked at the people around me and friendships, and it just rang so true. They're think about your own lives. Like there are so many people who we bend for, who we sort of bite our tongue and make allowances for, and their relationship, they have such a long history and a complicated history and a painful history. Liz isn't doing well either. She's also processing a lot of grief and trauma. And I think that her way of dealing with it is pouring herself into that friendship, into that role as caretaker for Charlie. And it's a little bit unhealthy, because I think that there's a little bit of selfishness in there as well, where she kind of thrives on that. And when she says to Thomas on the porch, like, I'm the only one who can save him, I think that you see a little bit of that come out. So I think it's important not to judge your characters, but I also think it's, you shouldn't be trying to play the very best version of them always. You should be looking for their flaws and trying to show that as well.
Do you think there's a little codependence between the two of them?
Oh,
too?
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I love the scene where you're watching television together and you just sort of have that lovely moment of, I mean, it felt so real to me. Was that sort of an interesting thing to pick too?
Yeah, I think I just wanted Liz to be, physical with him in ways other than just taking his blood pressure and monitoring him. There's a definite warmth and a love, and it means so much for somebody to touch you, to give you a hug or to just rub your hand or your shoulder or something like that. And I think that those little moments, even like pinching his nipple, I felt like there was a lot of love and so much said in those physical moments.
You also have that wonderful scene where you realize that he has money. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
I think that's the most devastating scene for Liz, is to realize that he's been keeping this secret from her. And it's just, I mean, that really rocked her world. Because it wasn't just that he was keeping a secret, but the reason why. And I think it just showed her, oh, this is where I stand with this person. I wasn't who I thought I was to him, but then of course, for her to come back, I thought that said so much about their relationship and her love for him that, she took some time and thought about it and understood it and still came back and checked on him.
I wonder what it's like to actually see this film after you've acted in it, because I would imagine it's such a sort of propulsive film. I mean, it really is. There's so much intensity to it, and I wonder, were you surprised?
I was so surprised. Darren was nice enough to get them to screen it for me in a theater, and so he didn't send me a link for me to watch it on my laptop or my TV at home. He let me see it on a theater big screen, and I took my two brothers, and I cried so hard. And I was surprised by the score, by the editing, by the framing, and it just all made sense what he was doing. And I thought, wow, this is why he's Darren Aronofsky, It was just so surprising. And I think this was one of the rare times where I thought a play adaptation actually worked on screen.
Well, it's very cinematic without doing anything that you would think of to make it cinematic, which is so interesting.
Him and Matthew Libatique, our cinematographer, amazing.
I also just want to ask you about the menu, because you're incredible in that film as well, and so different. Can you just say a little bit about what that's like and how that came to you too?
Yeah, so I was very lucky in 2021. I did 4 movies. I did The Whale, and then when I was in New York doing The Whale, I got offered Showing Up with Kelly Reichardt, who I love. So I did that, and while I was in Portland shooting Showing Up, I got the script for The Menu. And there wasn't much there on the page for Elsa, my character in that movie. And so part of agreeing to do the role and talking to Mark Mylod, our director, about it was, ways that we could give her some definition, because in the script she was just written as a severe Scandinavian woman. Okay. And so it was... I started sending Mark some photos about how I thought maybe we could have her look, because I didn't want her to, because she's such a follower of the chef, I didn't want her to seem like she was just a mindless zombie who was, doing whatever, and she was in this cult. I wanted to give her some intelligence and a reason for being there, even though the character doesn't break into a monologue and explain like her whole past and how she came to be there. So I said to Mark, I just don't want her to seem like she went to NYU and studied management and hospitality and became a restaurant manager, because what they were thinking was that she would be very plainly dressed, very unremarkable, and I was like, oh no, please don't ask me to be in your movie and be just boring. So Amy Westcott, our costume designer, also happens to be Mark Mylod's wife, and she was very happy to conspire with me against Mark and his wishes, and she came up with that really great costume that's so graphic and just visually impactful, and that just helped me so much. And we did little compromises, like instead of shaving my eyebrows like I wanted to, we bleached my eyebrows, that sort of thing. And I'm just so glad that, if you're going to have a disagreement with anybody, Mark Mylod's the person, because he's just so open and intelligent and sensitive and willing to give in. And I just really loved working with him and working on that role.
And when you approach these roles, I mean, how much do you try to create a backstory for the characters, or how do you kind of?
With Liz, I didn't have to so much because there was a lot there on the page. And with Elsa, there was nothing there. So in that case, I did sort of have to map out who she was before we see her on screen, because I think that is the actor's job, is to make it seem like your character has lived a full life prior to just arriving on the frame for the first time.
This film obviously has The Whale and The Menu too, but has had such a profound impact on people. I was at the Toronto Film Festival where it premiered, and people were, you could hear them; they were audibly sobbing. What is it why do you think it's resonating so strongly when people see it?
I think we've had a really weird, difficult 2 years, right? And I think that even though we've had a lot of tragedy and seen a lot of bad news on television, I think there's something cathartic about sitting in a dark theater with other people and just having an emotional release. And unfortunately, the movie business changing the way it is, I think we're not making these types of movies where it's okay to go for big emotions and to just have your heart just laying out there for people. I think a lot of maybe filmmakers or people who finance movies are a little bit afraid of that, and I'm just glad that the Darren Aronofsky wasn't afraid of that in this case.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and will you join me in thanking him?